All right, everybody. We can get started. So welcome, everybody. My name is Denise Agosto. I am the director of the master's program, the Masters of Science in Information at Drexel University's College of Computing and Informatics. Welcome today to today's webinar. This is our second in a two-part series, The Hiring Outlook for HCI and UX Professionals. We are very excited to have you here today. We have exciting presentations from three guests who will talk about their careers in the fields of user experience. But first, I would like to give a little plug to our master's program for those of you who are not familiar with it. This is our master's program. It's the Master's in Information with the concentration and major in Human-Computer Interaction and HCI. If you're curious and you'd like to learn more, you can see the URL at the bottom of the page here. Come visit us. We'll tell you about our master's program. All right, enough with the advertising. Now back to today's program. Today, we have three guests, as I said. They will speak in a different order than listed on the slide. First, we'll hear from Diana Kusunoki, who is in User Experience and Research Manager at White Ops. And she has the best background and the best t-shirt. So the other members of the panel were all saying that we're jealous of her. Second, we will hear from Chuong Nguyen, who is the chair of PhillyCHI, and he'll tell you guys a bit about PhillyCHI here in Philadelphia. And he's also a product designer with Comcast. Nice background too, but sorry, Diana's is still better. And last, we will hear from Michael Dickard, who is a UX research manager, fairly recently promoted, so we're all very excited about this, and he's with Vanguard. And again, my name is Denise Agosto. Welcome. Before we get started, actually, if you would post a bit, tell us in the chat where you're from. We'd love to hear a little bit about you. And also, when you have questions in the chat, stop sharing. If you'd like, we suggest that you use C for a comment to indicate you'd like to make a comment, or Q for a question to tell us that you have a question for our presenters. This was Michael's suggestion, so we'll take it. Look, we have one person from New York City. Yay, welcome, New York in the house. Somebody from LA, other coast, Washington State, but really from Texas, Milwaukee, Idaho. Wow, this is fantastic. The list goes on. If you have a second to post in the chat, we really would love to hear about you and get to know about you a bit. There will be time after each presentation for questions, and then also at the end, hopefully we can get the panel talking to each other and talking to you as well. And when you do have questions and comments, again, please put them in the chat. All right, that's it for the introduction. Now, welcome. We will hear from Diana.
Great. Hi, I'm Diana Kusunoki. Thank you so much for having me and joining us for this session. I just want to give you a little bit of intro about me. So I've spent the last 15 years designing and building software platforms across industries, including cybersecurity, pediatric trauma resuscitation, libraries, and small businesses. And I'm currently the user experience and research manager at White Ops. White Ops is a cybersecurity company protecting enterprises all over the globe, including some of the largest internet platforms from these sophisticated bots. And our mission is to protect the integrity of the internet by verifying the humanity of every online interaction and disrupt the economics of cybercrime. So we secure things like digital advertising, web applications, marketing campaigns, and more by verifying 10 trillion interactions a week. So more about my role. A large focus of my work at White Ops is really centered on creating the user experience to support our customers in fighting the bad bots of the web. So I architect and design our entire customer experience end-to-end for a whole suite of products. Customers experience sort of the power of the of our security products from through the form of a portal. And that supports their investigative workflows. It provides them with these actionable insights and then integrates these essential tools that they need to mitigate against bad actors with their technology. And I engage with the stakeholders in my participatory design process to tackle these complex problems in a highly technical space and then create ideally elegant design solutions. And I ensure that our user experience architectures and features scale across products and use cases, and then lead our cross-functional teams to execute my vision. And I've been with White Apps for the last 5 years. We're just talking about how that's crazy. It was a half decade. And I recently designed the entire design, led the entire design of our products through to a company acquisition in December. So I thought it might be helpful to share some of my experiences, like with regard to a few questions that I'm asked frequently by people. So the first one is like, how do I make the transition from academia to industry? So I did this. First, short answer, become part of our community of practice and describe your iterative design process to help the hiring managers envision how you'll adapt to the pace of industry. In my case, it was more about networking than anything. So like a colleague that graduated a couple of years ahead of me invited me to tech breakfast in New York, where I met a data scientist that was working at my company at the time. And he forwarded on my resume, and I got interviews right away with the lead engineer, the head of product, and actually the chief technical officer. And I honestly didn't have a portfolio. I wasn't really ready. And most of my descriptions of my design process, I conducted from my dissertation. So my company was about a quarter of the size it is now. So it was less than 40 people. It's now almost 200 when I joined. So, there's some benefits in trying out a smaller company to get started. While there's an element of luck, you can significantly increase your chances of receiving opportunities by integrating with the UX community. So I'm sure that Chuong will touch on this. So go to PhillyCHI events, join the local UXPA chapter. A lot of things are remote now, so it's easier to access for various communities. So you never know who you're going to meet and how you might get connected. So participate, volunteer, even mentor. So you'll be recognized in the community, and you'll be surprised. Like the community is a lot tighter knit than you might think, even in big cities like New York City, where I am now. And one thing you may get questions about is your ability to adapt to the pace of industry. So yeah, I certainly got those questions. In industry, we're continuously designing and releasing multiple features across multiple products at once. And it's usually more about these shorter design iterations to deliver incremental value over time than projects with these larger scale research programs and long-term trajectory research projects. So you want to prepare to describe how you can adapt and learn. Another one is, how do I break into an industry position without experience launching a project into the hands of customers? So like releasing something live. There's a few things you can do to demonstrate your knowledge by describing your process, or gain experience by taking on different projects with developers. So try and have a few, like 1 to 2 case studies in your back pocket before you start interviewing. And it could really be a challenge, really challenging to find like a company that will hire folks without this proven track record of successfully launching features to real users. And that part, I personally emphasize that I'm familiar enough with the UI development process to build and deploy my own website, which I built and launched through GitHub. And I also used to build websites for smaller businesses. And then I also pointed to a project that I worked on with a developer building. So even though that didn't actually get deployed in the real world, my company was more willing to take a chance on me because I described my process of how I work with that developer really well. It can really be tough to get that initial experience working with developers. So you want to pair it with some developer friends that you meet on campus or through PhillyCHI on projects to implement your designs. And it's still like really good experience, even if you're not launching. And if you're not already in a co-op, you can see if you can volunteer to assist in projects in the community. So PhillyCHI might be a good place. If you're already employed but you're like in a different role, wanting to make a shift, request taking on projects that will require the skills that you'll need for the role that you want, so you can build up your portfolio in case studies. And last one, how do I figure out which design track to choose? I was asking myself the same questions at the beginning, like, do I do research or design? Do I stay in management or take the specialized individual contributor path? Like all of those questions I was asking myself. And after 5 years of kind of exploring this, I say just start with something. Your choices don't have to be permanent. You can test things out and pivot. I started out in a very omnidisciplined role as a UI UX designer and developer. So I basically did everything front end for about half a year. And I soon realized that I wanted to leave development to like full developers, because they specialize in that. So instead, I brought in more research to the development process as a UX researcher and designer. And I've been trying out UX management and have had to fill in as a product manager even. So now my next goal is to be a UX architect, where I can still have my feet in both research and design, but then like the scope is really focused on building those broader experiences across an entire product ecosystem. So there's like different levels of scope there. So far, I've been pretty lucky to be able to like try out every aspect of design and then carve out my path as I went. So there's benefits there. So if you go with an omnidisciplined role, you'll be able to build up that proven track record in each area to point to if you want to, like choose a particular path later, like if you want to. And there are, some obvious downsides to doing this omnidisciplined role path. So you'll end up wearing a lot of hats, and then the expectations and workloads can be quite heavy at sometimes. But at the end of the day, you can say that you tried it. And then in some cases that you're able to lead like design end to end. So it's a good feeling. And that's kind of like an intro to the frequently asked questions that I've gotten. So thank you for that.
Great, thanks so much, Diana. Let's see, we had one comment I noticed from Michael who said becoming part of the UX community is so important, 100 to this point. Mike also listed a primer to research in the tech sector that he's been working on, so you can find the link here. Some of you might find this helpful. Thank you. All right, so let's take a few minutes before we hear from our next speaker. If you have questions, you can post them in the chat for Diana.
I'm just going to reiterate how important it is to start going to local communities like Diana mentioned, whether it's PhillyCHI or other sorts of groups that are related to UX, because I think networking and getting to know people in the community and how they talk is so important. Sorry, I have to take a call related to the house that I'm purchasing.
So I have a question for Diana, if you don't mind, Diana.
Sure.
So if you're looking back and what is you want to say for your younger self as a UX designer, researcher, and now as manager?
Oh, looking back, I would say I think my scope was still a little too large, even though it was nice to be able to try out some of the UI development parts of it, because I could see how my designs will become part of the product and how it gets implemented. I think I probably would have focused on bringing in research earlier instead of working on development, simply because like I probably would have needed a little bit more time to promote the need for research. I think it takes a really long time to get companies on board with what that means and why they should be spending money on someone doing it. So I would have focused a little bit earlier on doing that.
Awesome, thank you.
I see a comment. Someone asked, you mentioned that we need to communicate how we can adapt to industry standard as academics. And I just wanted to say that one of the most common challenges that I see from academics coming into industry is thinking about the impact that your research will have on the product rather than something that might be interesting theoretically. So when you are in industry, you really need to understand how the product will impact the business in some way. And if you're focusing more on things that you think are interesting because it'll provide some contribution to the field, but it doesn't connect back to maybe necessarily how people will use it or how the business makes money or how they grow, depending on the type of business you're working in and their goals, then I think that is something that you would want to consider a little bit more as you think about how your research applies to the industry setting. And we could probably expand on that a little bit more. I see Diana nodding her head if you want to jump in.
Sure. And to elaborate on what I meant there, oftentimes it's really important to be able to communicate how your design will translate into these incremental releases. So we're not waiting months and months and months to build a design and then release. There's a lot of risk in building a product and then releasing a large release at once. So you'll need to figure out how to scope your design into releasable pieces. And that'll take a little bit of practice, but if you could describe, learn how to describe and scope down and say, okay, of this like ideal design, this is the first thing we can deliver that will have the most impact and be ready and available to customers. And then it needs to be workable. So you can't just have a piece that doesn't work with the rest of the systems. You'll need to be able to scope the design that way.
Yeah, I'm just adding additional comments in the chat, but everything you said, 100% agree. We're not going to spend a year developing one specific feature if it's not going to have a specific, you need to understand how that feature or product relates to some outcome for the people who might be using it. And we're not going to build that perfect thing right off the bat, like immediately or over the course of a year and then release it. We're going to, like Diana said, develop little bits of it and a minimum viable version of it that is very basic that we could build upon and improve upon afterwards.
Great, thank you. Other questions for Diana before we move on? We'll still have more chance to talk to her as well. All right, well, in that case, Chuong's going to go next, and I hope he's going to pick up a little bit on this idea of the importance of networking. I think that's definitely in his wheelhouse. So welcome.
Thank you, Denise. I'm so grateful to have both Diana and Michael promote PhillyCHI. I'm so proud. I'm kind of like a proud father. You see my child just grow. Well, I'm excited for this event, first of all, because this is hiring UX professional is something that I hold it really close to my heart. And as a career changer and as a community organizer, I know that this topic is really important. So thank you for these opportunities. A little bit about me. I'm a product designer and currently work for voice team at Comcast. I have an engineering background. So I started my career as a radar engineer in France. So Denise, you mentioned France before. So I was in France for 8 years I did a radar engineer, and then later made my way into UX as a UX engineer. And I worked for a software company before Comcast. I also a community organizer. I've been involved with PhillyCHI for last 3 years. I started as a volunteer for PhillyCHI, and then later made my way to chair for PhillyCHI. A full disclaimer, I'm no longer a chair for PhillyCHI. I'm an outgoing chair, and then I'm really excited for the new board member that we have this year. So if you guys don't know about PhillyCHI, and for those who chime in from different states, PhillyCHI is a local chapter of ACM, so Association for Computer Machine, for computer machinery, special interest groups in UX. So our mission is really advancing UX as a disciplines and really strengthening the UX community, the local UX community through regular regular events where you can actually learn about UX and where you can actually networking. So that's really important you get involved with the community here. We dedicate our work to the culture of sharing and community building. So if you want to know more about PhillyCHI, you can feel free to follow up on Twitter at PhillyCHI or Instagram at PhillyCHI_UX. Actually, our next 2021 event going to be tomorrow. So if you want to check it out. Let's jump to Comcast as a company and what my work as a UX designer, as a product designer and UX designer. For those who don't know, I don't know if you don't know Comcast, but Comcast is the largest broadcasting company in the world, and our business expand from the US to Europe as we just bought Sky. So we sit in between the media in the technology intersection. So we are, as a company, as an internet cable provider and content provider with NBC News, we are in the sweet spot of like distribution and media. My team at Comcast, a voice team, we are responsible for the end-to-end customer journey of the voice user. So the mission for our team is really do everything to help voice as the best way or the favorite way of user to interact with our large amount of content and product. We are really a small team. We are 6 people, and we are combined by designers, UX writer, interactions and animations designers, and a researcher. So yeah, because as a voice is connecting issues that tie everything together. I got to interact with different teams, different designers from multiple backgrounds. I work with hardware designs to lightings and sound UI design to engineer and product people. So so if you don't know about the voice remote, it's actually the remote that you have, and you have the voice button where you can press on it and actually say a voice command where you can actually search for content. For example, the title of the movies, or something more complicated like arm your home systems to ask for something so random as the Wi-Fi password. So that's just a bit about the voice remote that we do. As a voice, when I first started at Comcast, I worked on the voice UI for the entertainment and for the TV entertainment space, and then quicker make my way to broaden my scope of work to multimodal designs, where I got designed to multiple touch points, from sound, from lightings to haptics, all hardware, and also work really closely with the voice recognition technologist. So that is a little bit about the work that I do at Comcast. And so the most important things and what we are here is, so what's the best approach when it comes to UX job searching? I am very happy that Diana mentioned the fact that she moved from different scope throughout the UX spectrum and discover her passion about what kind of things on UX that she like about. So that's the most important things that I would like to recommend. I want to state this right off the bat, as people hire you for your quality of the work, your quality of the quality of your work, and then your personality is like who you are and what you're passionate about, right? So the first important thing is really works on figure out your UX identity. So looking at the whole UX spectrum, what is the things that you're interested in? For example, if you are coming from a graphic design background, you are most likely to interested in UI design, where you work with typography, illustration, and hierarchy of the UI. If you're coming from a CS background like me, you are most interested in you can be most you can sell your profiles as as UX engineer, as where someone who can actually code, someone you use the engineering knowledge. That is things I want to point out. Or if you're coming from, because UX is so large, and you can actually come from a linguistic or a writer, so you can actually leverage that skills as a UX writer and content strategist. So really looking at what you are good at and who you are, and then represent and work on how you present yourself as a designer. So that's the first thing I want to mention. The second thing is working on, like, do your homework, like working on your resume and your portfolios. So Diana mentioned that you can pick 2 case studies, and when you pick 2 case studies, make sure that it's the UX case studies, not the UI visual design case study. So because you want to get a job in UX, right? So make sure that. Make sure that you show your thought process and how you decided your decision, and talk to the business angle of it. Like, what is your problem you're trying to solve here that help the business? So that is the things I want to point out on the portfolio side, and know and work it very well in the presentation skills. So one of the framework that I like to mention is the Amazon framework. It's STAR framework. I think it's Drexel mentioned that in the Instagram Instagram feed. So the STAR framework is stand for situation, task, action, and result. So really walking through what is the situation here, what is the problem you try to solve here, and what you do as a designer, or what your task, what your action is to take. So either you go out there and talk to people and do like research, and then you coming to do like your user insight and do like affinity mapping or something like that. So talking to that and what the result. So what from their solution that you come up with, what is the result that you have here? So really emphasize that. And then don't forget to add your personal touch. Like, at the end of the day, you are hired by your personality too, your soft skills too. Like, be friendly, be ask the right questions, interested in the company. The thing that I want to mention is don't mass apply. Like, mass applying is not, it's not a good approach. I know that you are desperate to get a job when you first get out from the school, but take like 3 or 4, 5 companies that you really do research in and out of that company. What type of product is that the company doing? What is the market that the company is focusing on? So do that. So then the recruiter can actually, understand, wow, this candidate know our company in and out, and know the product in and out. And last, that's the more important thing, honey, is get involved with the community, like the UX community, and where is this where you actually learn about UX trend, learn about the UX vocabulary, and talk like a UX designer, even though you just first started. And then networking and find mentor, and that's where I started as a UX designer. So yeah, that is all from me. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
There is a question for you in the chat about research portfolios. Take a minute to read.
So yeah, while he's reading, I'll jump in and give quick 2 cents on that question. I think, thinking more about the story and not so much about putting tons of text on the slides, but like showing the different parts of the process that you went through for the research. If you have pictures of yourself conducting research, that's something that really helps tell a story. If you don't take pictures of yourself doing research or talking to participants or like putting sticky notes on a board or something, these are all very common elements that people take photos and think about things that can tell a story in that way. Also, I think Chuong was mentioning as well was thinking about how it might impact a product, even if you are doing research that isn't necessarily for a product. If it's related to something that might be, that could help, as well as thinking about how you might frame the findings in relation to a product if there is something there. And then getting feedback from other people. I always encourage people to go show this off to other people in the community, other people who are students with you as well, and get their feedback on it. And if anyone is a designer and you're not a designer, ask them if they can help you out too, and you're happy to help them out in something in return, whether it's like a project or research that they might be interested in doing. Because I know I myself am not great at making beautiful decks, but the designers I work with are amazing at that. So I often work with them to make my decks look a lot better too.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael, for answering these questions. Aisha, I'm sorry I pronounced your name wrong, but for the UX research angle, I think there's so many things that you can actually showcase your thought process. Again, picking back on the Michael view. For example, let me give you an example. Right now, if you go to quantitative, your quantitative insight, you can go through. If I go to the voice command, if for example the voice command that users say a day, I go to the large amount of spreadsheet, which is really boring as a researcher, but you can actually highlighting it, or you highlight it as a color. You can color coding it and actually showing case that, hey, I regrouping this those voice command as one groups and the other one as one group, and then how I can actually from those groups identify the pattern that how user ask. So that's kind of like in like how you explain your thought process visually. I think there's so much opportunities that you can explore. If you don't know how to do it, and on the visual angle, you can and ask for your make friend with a graphic designer where they can help you to do storytelling and colors and pattern and typography you can show from that angle.
I would definitely agree with both Michael and Chuong about if you're going to do a research portfolio. So I've had mentees who are trying to break into UX research, and one of the things that I encouraged them to do was not only describe their process and like each step, and then the decisions that they made at each step and why towards an end goal. Also had them sort of visualize the process itself. So this is what you can create diagrams to communicate that at a high level that will really help the hiring manager understand the way you think, how you interact with potential developers or with other designers. So I would highly encourage thinking about from a process level, trying to visualize those things.
Yes, 100% with Diana too. Is you can showcase the diagram, you can showcase the you are able to look at the customer journey, so you can do flows from A to Z and how people interact with the products, and then you can do like network mapping, like starting from what's the goal.
All right, so for my project too, for the Dystopia project, I watched the movie Divergent. It's the first movie of a trilogy. I actually watched the books when I was younger as a kid and just rewatched the movies to just kind of refresh myself. This is around the same time era as the Hunger Games movies kind of came out, so that was kind of along the same train of thought. So kind of an overview of the movie. There's a civilization in a post-apocalyptic world where 5 groups of people, or known as 5 factions, come together as one and do their equal part at living.
Yeah, he's not.
These are governed by one of the factions,
Search Hunter,
which I will get into later.
List.
But basically, the general gist of the movie is that the main character is around the age of 18, which is the point where you get to.
There we go.
There we go.
All right. Excuse that. I don't understand.
Probably a Zoom bomber just coming and crashing the party.
All right. So as we were, continue.
I don't remember where we left off, but something.
You're talking about different ideas and how you can talk about decisions you've made and choices you've made when you are presenting academic work or projects you've done previously in job interviews. Are there other comments or additional ideas on that topic?
I think I put a couple more comments in the chat as well, and then I'll just kind of leave it at that. But like telling the story, what your role was in the research, how you made decisions about why you chose that method or those methods. And again, I'm thinking more about research specifically. And if you were a designer, we often look for how did you choose those designs? Why did you go that route? Did research inform it? But just thinking about the different aspects to it, the role you played, what went wrong, what you might do differently in the future, those are important things that we might suss out in an interview process.
Okay, all right, thank you. Do we have other questions before we move on to our final presenter? All right, thank you very much. Now let's hear from Michael.
All right, hello everyone. My name is at Vanguard, and for anyone who is unfamiliar, Vanguard is an investment firm, one of the largest in the world, and it is also a brokerage. So what that means is you could come here and invest your money in the stock market or in mutual funds or ETFs. And people often do that sort of thing when they're saving for retirement. So we're really focused on helping people save money over periods of 20, 30 or more years. And we have a team here of UX researchers. I think we have about 21 people here now, and I manage 7 of them. And we are continuing to grow. So quick plug, if anyone is interested in a job, we have both full-time, more senior roles and contractor positions. And I know it's hard to get your foot in the door, so to say, in industry, especially if you don't have research experience in industry. So I definitely recommend people A, apply to internships. B, if you don't have as much experience or any experience yet, contractor roles might be a good opportunity for you to start to get experience. They tend to pay a little bit more than some full-time roles, but you don't get all the benefits, and they're a little bit less stable because you might be on a contract for 3 to 6 months, for example. But that is one route that you might grow. And that is one reason why we opened some contractor roles here at Vanguard. So if you are interested in that, I'll put some information in the chat later. You could send me your resume personally. But back to Vanguard. So we have about 21 researchers here now. The way that we work, just for context, is we have different researchers and we have different labs. They're groups or teams of people who focus on specific problems or products. And so you could think of a journey that you might go through. When you join a company, you have to sign up, put in all this information, and then start doing the thing it is that you want to do with that company. For Vanguard, it's investing your money, transferring money, and all of that. So we have a team of people dedicated to improving that experience of becoming a Vanguard client or customer. And then we have other people who focus on other things. For example, some of you might have heard of things like robo-advisors. So if you think of like Wealthfront or Betterment, there are ways to just put money away and it automatically invests it for you and helps you out rather than you having to manage your money and invest it yourself. And so we have a team who's dedicated to that. We have on each team a researcher, a designer, a content writer, a strategist, a product manager, and some developers and engineers. And they all work together on that problem. And as a researcher, for example, you help identify the problems with the rest of the team that you might want to address. And then you work with them to understand what those problems are, how people experience them, how we can make things easier for them to meet their goals, things of that nature. And you really have a lot of autonomy in this sort of space when you're embedded on a team like that and focusing on problems with the rest of the folks on that team. And something for me, as someone coming from academia into industry, that took me a while to adjust to, is that in academia, if you're a grad student, for example, you're a researcher and around a lot of other expert researchers, and they're often smarter than you. So Denise here, she's smarter than me in research, and I was learning from her, and I'm always looking to all the peers around me, and they're all super intelligent in research. And when you go into industry, if you're embedded on a team as like one of the researchers within that group, they are no longer experts in research. You are the expert. And that took me a little while to adjust to because they might know business problems that you should be focusing on, but how to address the research problems is where you come in and really like use your skill set. And I bring this up because when you transition into industry, it's important to remember that they are experts on your team and their specific domains, but you're the one who knows research. And so both understand that they know what they're talking about, but don't. So they might be like, oh, you should do a survey on this. And you'll be like, that doesn't quite seem like the right method for solving this problem. It probably isn't, because they might not know that that's not the best method for it. So just keep that in mind, but they are super expert in other things. And so if you're new to industry, you might not know the right problems to be solving quite yet, or what's important to the business. And so leaning on those other people and working with them to understand what you should be focusing on will be really important. So stepping back a little bit, I'll talk a little bit about where I came from and how I got into UX, and then I'll go into what I look for in other people when I'm hiring. So for me, I came from academia. I started off as a sociologist and then made my way into the information school and studied information science and social computing. And I did that because in sociology, they weren't really focusing on internet and other technologies when I was getting my master's there. It was as if technology didn't exist, which was very odd to me because I studied that space. And that was one of the reasons I came over here to Drexel to study HCI, social computing, information science sort of thing. And while there, I realized I don't really like focusing on the same problem for years at a time. I really enjoy the idea of like seeing an impact more quickly and working on different projects more quickly. And so when I did an internship at Yahoo, I discovered that I really truly love doing research in industry. And I really love the collaborative spirit. So even though you collaborate with people in academia, in industry, it is by default the norm. Everything you do is going to be collaborating with people constantly all the time. You are never making a decision without other people. Everything you prioritize and focus on is done collaboratively with other people in the group or team that you're on. So that's something that I found super exciting and enjoyable. And then after I did the internship at Yahoo, I then worked at Comcast Business, and I helped build out some of their UX research practices there with some other folks. And the business side, the Xfinity side of Comcast has a very robust system over there already. And then I left Comcast Business to join Vanguard, where I started off as an individual researcher and then moved into management. And so that's kind of my story. I'll quickly run through a few things as well regarding the hiring process that I think might be important for people to consider. One is, the portfolio. I didn't used to encourage people to have a research portfolio, but I definitely do now. Being on the hiring side now, it is so helpful for people to come in and like have something to talk about and show me. So, we talked a little bit about that already. I won't go through it all, but like thinking about the process, your role in it, and all those sorts of things is important. And putting them in some sort of deck or PDF type format that you could walk through people with. Now, the other sorts of things I look at, not just the research skills, but also things like, are you collaborative? You might not have as many opportunities in academia to collaborate all the time, but I think you really do. I know, especially at Drexel, there are tons of opportunities to collaborate as part of team projects, as well as with academics and other folks in the community as well. So I highly encourage you to do some sort of collaborative thing, either while at school or with other people outside of the university setting. And talking about that will be important because we don't want people with big egos who are going off doing their own thing and not collaborating and working well with other people. Another thing is things rarely go perfectly in research, whether it's a participant who doesn't show up or a participant who doesn't talk or act or give you the types of information you expect them to give you, or the questions you ask them not being interpreted in the way that you expected. So there's all sorts of things that go wrong. And something that I often look for is being able to be flexible and adjusting on the fly as you are doing something. So that's why I brought up like talk about things that didn't go well in the research or how you might do things different impact this project. Or if you only had 4 weeks to work on it instead of 3 months, how would that impact what you would have done? Think through those sorts of problems and be prepared to answer those sorts of questions when you're in an interview process, because I think it'll really help you out and help you shine. a couple of practical considerations too I'll run through is you can't just, there are lots of places you could get jobs in the UX field. It's not just big companies like Comcast or Vanguard or Google or Facebook. There are tons of smaller companies that are just starting out with research. Those could provide lots of opportunity for you to grow and learn on your own, but maybe not as much from a team of super talented individuals where they already have a team of people. So that might be something to consider when you're talking to recruiters and people, is like, how big is the team? How do you work with other people, to kind of get a sense of, are you going to be one of the first people here starting off, or are there going to be other people you could learn from? I mentioned contractor roles being kind of a good thing to consider, and also agencies. So there are a lot of agencies where they put together teams of people or set you off to another company to help them out on solving a specific problem. And there are lots of amazing agencies out there as well, where you could really learn a lot from other people there who are expert in their field as well. I'll pause there. I have a lot more I could say, but I want to be aware of the questions and time here. So I'll stop there.
I did see 2 questions come through in the chat. Thank you, Michael, by the way. The first one I think is addressed to all 3 of you. Are there opportunities for internships in your organizations? Maybe Michael first.
Sure, I'll start off. So there are certain types of internship roles at Vanguard, not necessarily for UX research yet, but we are planning to start that up. So Jess, who is my boss and helps me lead the team, and I are both working on getting internships started soon, especially hopefully in collaboration with Drexel and their co-op program. But that's like very early stage and it's not there yet.
How about Diana? Oops.
Sorry. At White Apps, we have internships for some of the other types of roles. We have not started internship program for UX specifically. Maybe a little bit down the line, we're looking to expand the team. So we'd be looking for product designers, potential design leads, and we also have like product positions if you're leaning towards more of that. But no official internship opportunities yet.
I can talk a bit about more Comcast and the experience design team that I have. We usually have 1 or 2 co-op from Drexel come to us as their internship and co-op opportunities. But right now we don't have anything yet. But I want to mention that we have 2 contractor role opening. We are looking for not like a junior level, but more on a mid level that have to focus on interactions and the UI design. So if you're interested to work on the voice space, on the multimodal design, you can message me.
And the other set of questions that came through while you were speaking, Mike, what are the 3 most common methods you use? Are there methods one should have a complete understanding of before applying? And do we have to have mastery of these methods, presumably in order to be hired?
So I will say it depends on the role you're applying for, but I think if you have a qualitative base and you could do interviews, that is a great skill set to continue to hone and really focus on, because qualitative skills are in high demand. And a lot of people think they could do qualitative research, but they're not good at it at all. And they just think it's talking to people, but that's really not the case. So I would encourage you to continue to flesh out your qualitative skills and other things tangential or related to that. A lot of design specific methods, usability testing, concept testing, card sorting, tree testing. These are very common sorts of things that you might use to improve a design. And I often refer to them as tactical research. So I would try and do as much of that as possible. It's very easy to do that as a side project somewhere with a group of people. So I think that's the key thing. Quantitative is also in high demand, but I think qualitative for the UX research field is really important to have.
I would echo that 100%, especially qualitative methods and interviewing skills. And I think Michael touched on this a little bit earlier, where being able to ask questions on the fly when things don't work out or people don't understand is incredibly important. So is even when you're interviewing with a position, you're going to want to demonstrate your interview skills in return. So I would prepare some questions for your interviewer. And then, yeah, and I would also reflect on the, I guess what's typically called user acceptance testing when you're working with a developer to test a live build on a staging environment. I would see if you can practice those skills working with maybe on a Zoom, and then you can have somebody test out, even if it's mocks or like some sort of like formative design testing skills are going to be super important. And that's going to feed all into the way that you're able to like release a project. So I think, yeah, I would echo that.
Great. Okay, then we have a question from Jessica, who wants to know suggestions for how to become better at interviewing, particularly interviewing skills. We did have one recommendation for a book, Interviewing Users by Steve Portical. But Jessica, did you mean interviewing for jobs or interviewing as a part of the research process?
So specifically, I meant, and Diana actually spoke to what I was speaking about, like asking questions on the fly, like that's kind of my difficulty. And like, how can you become better at those types of things? Like when your participants say something that's particularly interesting and you want to probe a little bit more into what they say, but that kind of derails what your guide is about. So how do you kind of shift, where you're going, and then you kind of have to get back on track? Like those are the kind of things that they don't teach you in your masters. So it's like, how do you deal with those things? I'm not really sure how to develop those kind of skills. I feel like that's what you learn in the field. So any suggestions?
I say practice, practice, practice. Yeah, those are all challenging things that you learn by doing over time. I think readings help provide the foundation and understanding for what you should do. And then when you're in the moment, enough times it becomes kind of second nature. So I sometimes let people go off on a tangent and then pull it back. And having good research questions helps you kind of stay focused on where you can go off a little bit, but always keeps you centered. So I think good research questions and developing those will help that out as well. But this could turn into a whole course, so I'll leave it at that for now.
We're getting more questions here.
And Jessica, I also don't be too hard to yourself too. Like if you straight out from work, straight out from school, the hiring manager know the level you are and what the expectation for you. So don't be too hard on that. Like no one is know everything for after that.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Next, we have a question from Meredith, who says in her job and internship search, she sees specialized positions, qualitative researcher, and so on. Do the panelists feel like there's a space in industry for UXers with a passion for both design and research? And do specialists have better hiring outlooks than people who are more general? Let's see. Chuong, you answered last time. Maybe you want to go first this time?
Just excuse me 1 second. I'm trying to read the question.
Oh, sure. Okay. Diane or Michael, how about you guys?
Sure, I'll jump in. So I'd say think about the product life cycle, and there are different points at which you're going to be engaging in different types of work. What I mean by that is sometimes you'll join a team and they have already developed a product and they're like in the middle of the life cycle of that product, meaning they've already determined what goals they want to try to solve for and the types of needs for their users that they want to solve for. And it's more figuring out how best to build it out in terms of addressing those needs. Others are so far along as just tweaking and improving to make it easier to use. Then others, it's like you're not quite there yet and you have to figure out what problems you want to solve for. And often, at least as a researcher and with the designers I work with, we focus on each part of that at different times. And so each quarter we try to focus on big problems and understanding a new problem space we might want to address, as well as improving the types of problems we're trying to solve for now, and then making it easier to use constantly over time. So we're always doing a little bit of each. I think as you become more senior, you could focus more on those bigger questions. But when you're newer, you tend to focus more on providing the foundation of understanding how to make iterative improvements.
I can add one thing on that is when you were talking to more like generalists and specialists, for me, researcher and designer are two things different. And so often designer can do some of researcher, like, like competitive analysis or like audit. But as a designer or for a company like Comcast, you're not expecting to do like, full scope of research. That is the role more like cater for researcher. And if you're looking more like internship, I think it's that if that company looking, if that job description is looking for a whole unicorn, and you need to be more pay attention to that company too. So it could be opportunities where you can, like, for example, if you have startups looking for UXer, you have more chance to like do everything. I think it's Michael mentioned it at one time already, but yeah, so that's what I want to say about specialist and generalist. Also, another point is you're gonna gravitate to the specialist lane later in your career. So when you first started, it's more on like generalist lane that you want to focus on.
Right, I would definitely echo that as well. And the point about larger companies versus smaller startup companies, I think generalist roles are more common in the smaller startups, and you will have to lift, but you do get to try out a few things. And if you're not really sure if you want to specialize or if you want to specialize up front, I would try and get that figured out before you start applying, and then target those specific companies based on the types of roles that you want. Yeah, and if you're looking to be a generalist and then move towards like kind of what I'm doing, where it's like UX architecture, you're still spanning like design and research, but the scope of the types of projects is different. So there's still a path for someone like that and me, because I have a hard time picking between the two. I love doing both. So there's look at UX architects and see kind of like their types of roles that they do.
We've got several more questions coming in. I don't know how the panelists are time-wise. If you guys want to stay, we are scheduled to end right now. It's up to you guys. What do you think?
I could stay another couple of minutes, and I'll just jump in and start answering a couple questions real quickly. So I see when you have a PhD, are you considered entry or mid-level? And I'm gonna like build on this with Dwayne's question as well. Like a lot of roles require 3+ years. So think of that more as a heuristic or guideline. 3 years, I wouldn't say that 3 years would translate to like 3 or 4 years of PhD research, but I would say that 3 years of PhD research will translate to a couple of years of like industry, because you have the skill set in which to do research, but you might not know how to apply it best in an industry setting to the business goals. And so I might look for, all right, if I'm saying 3 to 5 years for this role, if you have 2 to 4 years in PhD and maybe an internship, then you might be a possibly good fit for that sort of mid-level role. You're definitely not junior because you have a lot of research experience, but you're definitely not senior because you don't have any experience in industry. And so that's kind of how I tend to think of it. But when you do have 5 years in industry, you tend to know how to navigate that space well and the types of problems you might be solving for. And so that's something that means you could come into a company, immediately start working on problems and not require as much mentorship and help from someone else. Whereas if you have tons of experience in academia, but you haven't done any industry work, you probably need a little bit more handholding and like help in terms of like navigating that new space. And so that's what I think of with those years, is like more years means you could come in and I don't have to like mentor you as much. Less years and I probably have to do a little bit more handholding from my perspective as a manager.
Right. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Diana.
Oh, it might feel like the clock kind of resets, and then you may need to also educate your senior leadership to understand that parts of your research that you've done as a PhD student is applicable to the problems and research that you're doing in your industry space. So I would push back and then emphasize that it's not just training. It's like we are actively doing research in the field. So don't be afraid to push back.
I've seen the Dwayne asked a question about, there's their role for experienced designer who like to think through products ahead of the experience, like a future of TV. I can talk about that as a Comcast designer. I can do. I ensure you, Dwayne, there's a role, like there's a company who looking for that, but for that kind of position. But I would say that it's more on like, senior level position where you be able to, you understand the platform very well, you understand the company very well. And that's where you think about, what's the groundbreaking products that the company can provide to the market. There's more on the senior level that I think of. Comcast do that kind of works, and our team do kind of work too.
Okay, we're just about to close. One more quick question that Michael already answered in the chat. To Diane and Chuong, how do you feel about audience members connecting with you on LinkedIn?
Oh, feel free to reach out.
Yep, feel free to do that. I'm here. Just Google my name on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. All right, thank you to the three of you so much. Fantastic. I know I learned a lot. We really appreciate your time. This session has been recorded, and it will be posted to the College of Computing and Informatics YouTube channel in the next few days. So thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.